Hey, this is Braden, your med school advisor here, and today we're going to be talking about the best courses you can take as a pre-med in your undergraduate degree. If you don't want to watch the entire video and you're here for something specific, or you just want to see the highlights throughout the video, feel free to refer to all the timestamps in the video if you want to get to a specific thing. Alright, so with all that stuff out of the way, let's dive into it here. So the biggest reason why we're making this video here is that as a pre-med, things can be kind of overwhelming, and picking which courses to take, it can be a lot, especially that there's so many different options and you can only take so much, right? I feel you, I've been in your shoes before. It's very, very difficult to, kind of pinpoint, narrow down which ones do I absolutely have to take, which ones I should probably take, and which ones I should kind of disregard or maybe take if I have the time, and that's what this video is for. It's going to be a guide to kind of give you the course that you absolutely should take, the courses that you should probably take, and the courses that would be okay to take, but not the end of the world if you don't take them, if you don't have time. So that's going to be the point of this video, and we're going to dive into the list right now. All right, so to kick off our list here, we're going to start with the musts, the courses that I think are definitely the ones that you should definitely take before you apply to medical school. And number one on our list here, it probably comes as no surprise, is General Bio 1 and 2. Now, for those that have science majors, you're fortunate enough that it's going to be required for you to take them to complete your degree. But even for those that maybe are English majors or art majors, whatever, like if you're planning maybe to apply to medical school in the future, General Bio 1 and 2 is absolutely a must. You need to have these because most medical schools require these as prerequisites, right? If you're going to take the MCAT, it's a high yield topic on the bio section of the MCAT and the chem phys section of the MCAT, so that's really important. And even more importantly than those two things, biology basically is the foundational concept of modern medicine, of science, and of research in general. So definitely a must course, the number one course on our list here, General Bio 1 and 2, hands down. All right, so number 2 in priority here, the next one on our list is Gen Chem 1 and 2. Now again, if you're a science major, most of you, it's going to be required, but a lot of science majors though, I would say that Gen Chem 2 isn't required sometimes, but I would say if you can, definitely take it, because again, it's practically required by a lot of medical schools out there. It's a very high yield topic on the chem phys section of the MCAT, definitely very useful for that. Just knowing chemistry and understanding it very well, it's just something that's going to help you, moving forward in medicine and moving forward in research. It definitely comes up a lot. So, knowing those concepts is really going to help you moving forward down the road. And I would say definitely that's why, for all those reasons, Gen Chem 1 and 2 are number 2 on our list. And the reason why it's below, General Biology 1 and 2 is because, Gen Chem is, a high yield topic in medicine and research. I would argue that Gen Bio 1 and 2 is a little bit higher in priority with that. But nevertheless, Gen Chem 1 and 2 is very, very important and is definitely a must on our list. All right, so moving on to number 3 on our must section here is Organic Chemistry 1 and 2. Now, I know a lot of you are probably going to give me some heat for this because I get it. Organic chemistry is very difficult. A lot of you probably don't like it. I enjoyed it, but I did find it difficult. It was definitely one of the hardest classes I've ever taken. So I get you on that. But unfortunately, it is a prerequisite for a lot of medical schools. It comes up a lot for that. It's definitely a mid-yield topic on the chem phys section of the MCAT, so it's not quite as important as Gen Bio and Gen Chemistry, but it does come up a lot. And the biggest reason why I think it's very important is that biochemistry is heavily weighed nowadays in research and in medicine, and it's very important to understand it well. But that being said, if you understand the reactions that go on in organic chemistry, you're going to better understand all the concepts that you cover in biochemistry. So I would say that's arguably the biggest reason why Organic Chem 1 and 2 are so important. All right, and now it's a nice transition to number 4 on our list in the must is Biochem 1 and 2. Now, Biochem is not a prerequisite for all medical schools. Some require it, especially Biochem 1. That being said, Biochem is a super high yield topic on the MCAT. The bio section and the chem phys section, you see a ton of biochem. You need to have your amino acids memorized back and forth and know everything about them pretty much. It's very, very heavily weighed. And in medical school, you will encounter a lot of biochem concepts as well. So super important course to have. I would say arguably the course that you want to pay the most attention to. Now, the reason why it's not number one on our list and Gen Bio, Gen Chem, and Orgo are all ahead of it is because I would argue that you need to understand those three courses well before you can really, understand biochem. Now, some people do just memorize all the concepts in biochem and kind of regurgitate information. But I would argue that as a pre-med, you really want to understand these concepts. So you want to do well in your other classes, understand them very well. And then from there, you can understand all the concepts in biochem very well and kind of build from there when you go to medical school. So, but again, biochem, super, super important class. I would say it's definitely a must, even if it's not a prerequisite for your medical school. All right, so moving on to number 5 on our list here in the must section, and that's physics 1 and 2. Now, this is kind of interesting, right? Because when you think of physics, you don't think of medical school as something that's focusing really, really heavy on physics. You do see some concepts in cardiology and stuff like that, but you won't really see that much pure physics in medical school. Now, that being said, the reason why it's a must is that actually most medical schools do require it as a prerequisite. And also, it is kind of a mid-yield topic on the Chem Phys section of the MCAT. But the biggest reason is that, most medical schools require physics as a hard science. So I would say for that reason, and that reason pretty much alone, is why it's in the must section and not in my next section that's going to be highly recommended. And I would say number 6 here, and the last one on our must section, is English Composition 1 and 2. Now, you might be thinking, what does that have to do with medical school? And that's what I thought at first too. But actually, most med schools do require some sort of liberal art or humanity as a prerequisite. They usually require 6 credits, which is 2 courses. I would say that, English Comp also can be a prerequisite of itself. Some require straight writing classes. So I would say for that reason, it's probably a must here to take English Composition. I know that some are going to argue that it's not absolutely necessary for medical school, but I'm more on the side of saying that it kind of is, because it is often required as a prerequisite. And also, as a little bonus here, is that this class helps you with writing a lot. It's really writing heavy. Obviously you have to do some reading comprehension, stuff like that, but it's really, really writing heavy. And this in turn is actually going to help you develop your writing skills when it comes to writing your applications and all this stuff. So, that's kind of a little side bonus that English Composition definitely does help you with. All right, so moving on to our highly recommended section. So basically, these are the courses that I think you should definitely try to take if you can. Obviously, the must take priority, but these ones I would definitely say they're going to help you a ton if you take them. So number 1 on our list here for highly recommended would be statistics. Now, you might be asking, well, where am I going to use statistics as a doctor, right? How am I going to even use this? Is this going to be useful? And the answer is yes, it really will be. It's definitely, not only is it a prerequisite for some medical schools, not all require, but some do. But the bigger reason is that first, on the MCAT, you see a ton of statistics. It's a really, really subtle, high yield topic. All the passages you see, you encounter some sort of statistics along the lines, and you have to know how to read that and how to interpret it right and how to answer those questions. So that's the one reason. But I would say even more important is that as you're gonna, go through medicine, as you're gonna go and do some research and all that stuff, statistics is a highly, highly used skill and tool. So I would say for those reasons, stats is highly recommended. I would say if more medical schools required it, I would put it in the must section as well. But because only a few require it, I put it in highly recommended. But definitely, if you can take an elective and take a class, I would say take statistics if you can. All right, so number 2 here on our list for highly recommended is genetics. Now, genetics actually, I would say, helped me a ton. I didn't like it at first when I took general biology, but then when I dived deep into the genetics class, I fell in love with genetics. I really, really enjoyed it. My senior research project was actually on Drosophila, and it was all about genetics and mutations and upregulation, gene expression, all that fun stuff. But anyways, so genetics, I would say it's important because it's recommended by a lot of medical schools. It's not required usually. I don't really know of any that required, but even bigger of a reason I would say is that it's kind of a mid-yield topic on the biochem section of the MCAT. And the next big reason, and probably the most important, is that a lot of medical research, a lot of medicine, and a lot of disease, is based on genetics. Genetics is a foundational factor that if you understand it, it would definitely help you be, rationalize better and become a better physician in the process. So I would say genetics, definitely another one that's highly recommended in my books. All right, so moving on to number 3 on our list here, that's on highly recommended, is molecular biology. And that's kind of a nice segue from genetics, because genetics focuses a lot on, probability, Mendelian genetics, and all that stuff, whereas molecular biology really focuses on the molecular aspect of genetics, on DNA, gene expression, different techniques that are used now in research and labs and all that stuff. So, I would say molecular biology is probably one of the most interesting classes I've taken. I really, really enjoyed it. It was one of my favorites. Learning things like CRISPR, PCR, all that stuff. I thought it was fascinating, and it actually really helped me in the real world when I went and did real research. So that was a super cool class. I would highly recommend it. If you understand the concepts of molecular biology really well, it's gonna help you a ton on the biochem section of the MCAT, and a little bit on the chem phys section of the MCAT too. So for that reason, that's gonna help you. But just as you move forward through medical school, knowing those concepts really well and knowing those techniques is going to make your life a lot easier in med school and in research as well. So I would say definitely another highly recommended class to take if you can. All right, so moving on to number 4 here on our list of highly recommended, and that's cell biology. Now, the reason being is that a lot of medical schools definitely recommend cell biology, and it's highly regarded by them if you have it on your transcript. I would say also it's a high yield topic on the biochem section of the MCAT. It's really useful if you know how the cell works in depth. I would say I saw a lot of those questions on that section. So definitely for that regard, it's important. But even more importantly is if you understand how the cell is structured and how it works, it's definitely going to help you throughout medical school. It's definitely a foundational concept that's really useful, that even going beyond what you cover in general bio, if you go in depth in cell bio, you will see those concepts again in med school. So definitely, something that you want to consider, and that's why, it's highly recommended in bio books as well. All right, so moving on to number 5 here on our list on the highly recommended, and that's actually a nice segue from cell biology again. It's microbiology. Now, the reason why this one is so important is that, yes, it is highly, regarded by med schools. It's recommended by most of them. You do see some of it on the MCAT, especially in the bio section. But more importantly is that microbio is a foundational concept when it comes to disease, when it comes to research, and all that stuff. So, in med school, you're probably going to encounter a lot of microbiology concepts. I would say there's probably a whole block dedicated to it. Definitely something that I've heard my peers talk about that are in med school. So it's definitely, a course that's going to help you along the road if you take it. So that's why, it's highly recommended in my books. All right, and moving on to number 6 and last on our highly recommended list here is AMP, or Anatomy and Physiology. Now this one's interesting here, and the reason being is that it's not really covered that much on the MCAT. It's maybe, I would say, a mid to low yield topic on the biochem section. It's really not emphasized that much. But the thing is here is that it's well regarded by a lot of medical schools. And the reason being is that it's really covered extensively in medical school. It really is. And if you can, learn it in undergrad, kind of get a base for it and really understand, those concepts and how to prep for it, it's really going to pay dividends and help you once you get to medical school. Because once you're in med school, you cover a lot of anatomy and physiology. So I would say for those reasons, that's why it's not as high priority as the other ones mentioned before, but it's still, I would say, highly recommended for those reasons because it's so extensively covered in med school. All right, so we covered the must courses, we covered the highly recommended courses. So now moving on to our third and final section here are the courses that I would recommend taking if you can, but they're not the highest priority, right? These courses are the ones that if you do have time, definitely take those over other courses. but if you can't take them, it's not the end of the world. All right, so first on our list here is the psychology courses, and namely the two ones that I want to focus on here is Intro to Psychology and Developmental Psychology. Now, why is that? Well, I would say that on the MCAT, it's definitely a high yield topic in the psych-soc section. It's literally called psychology, half of it. So I would say, for that reason, it's definitely important. I've never seen a med school where it's a prerequisite, but it's definitely recommended. And I would say that, you do cover a lot of psychology in medical school as well. And it's really an interesting class too. So I would say if you have time, for all those reasons, taking, those two psychology courses could definitely help you down the road. So obviously it's not required. I would say for the MCAT, it's the easiest section to kind of cover if you can't take it in undergrad and learn them in undergrad. You can learn them on your own pretty easily. But that being said, if you can take them in undergrad, if you have time, I would take these courses over other courses that you might want to take. All right, and next, number 2 on our list here of the ones that you can take if you can is Intro to Sociology. Now, the reason being that it's under Intro to Psych and Developmental Psych is that yes, it's its own section on the MCAT, right? Yes, it's a pretty high yield topic, but I would argue that, the psychology aspect's a little bit more high yield than the sociology aspect. And I would say too that in medical school, you're probably gonna see more psychology than sociology. So for those reasons, it's under the psych portion. So, but that being said, it's still, covered quite extensively on that section of the MCAT, and you still see those concepts come up in your everyday life and in medical school too as you move forward. So I would say for those reasons, if you can take Intro to Soc, do it if you can, but obviously prioritize all the courses mentioned before you choose to take this course. All right, so moving on to number 3 on our take it if you can list is an ethics course. Now, the reason being is that ethics is, yes, well regarded by medical schools if you get it on your transcript. But I would say you'll encounter a lot of ethical scenarios if you have to take the Casper test. First of all, for a lot of Canadian applicants out there, it's required by a lot of medical programs. But even for US applicants, the Casper is starting to show up more and more. But even beyond the Casper, once you get to your, MMIs or your formal interviews, whatever the style is, you will probably be asked ethical scenarios. And ethics kind of, starts making you think, okay, how would I answer this? How would I answer that? What's the meaning of life? All these sorts of questions that you probably are too busy to think about usually. So really, really interesting course. I got a lot of value out of it. It's definitely helped me, through all those steps that I mentioned. And also as a doctor, beyond the Casper and the interviews, you're gonna encounter a lot of ethical dilemmas and you're gonna have to make some tough decisions. So having this foundation and building from it as you move forward throughout your life, I would say is really, really something that would be high value to you. So for that reason, I would say, prioritize the other courses before. This one isn't a must, but if you can, I would definitely say take ethics over other courses that I didn't mention. And now moving on to number 4 and last on our take it if you can list is medical terminology. Now this course really, is it well regarded by medical schools? Maybe, I don't know for a fact. Right? But I would say that the value that I got out of this course is just understanding, medical terms, and it really, really helped me, especially when I did shadowing, especially when I was volunteering in the hospitals. I could kind of pick up and understand what the physicians and nurses were talking about. For example, itis means inflammation, and things like that. I was like, oh, okay, that's what they mean by this. That's what they mean by arthritis, inflammation in the joints, right? So just little things like that, it really helped me, understand and follow along a little bit more and make more connections. So, this one isn't an absolute requirement by any means, but it's actually quite a useful course that will help you as you move forward in your medical career. All right, so that pretty much sums it up for our list here. One more thing I want to mention is that CARS is a section on the MCAT that you don't learn in undergrad, that you can't really learn in a course, and it's something that you can only really learn through practice. Obviously, having people guide you, having experts tutor you and all that stuff does help, but I would say start practicing today. Don't delay this. That's a mistake I made. And it's definitely, you know, my CAR score would have been a lot higher if I started practicing a lot sooner. So I would say one passage a day. It'll take you 10 minutes. If you can wake up and implement that in your morning routine somehow, you know, if you're serious about going to medical school and you have to write the MCAT, definitely start practicing it. You'll see the results, you know, down the road if you start practicing years in advance. So I would say, you know, start practicing that as soon as possible. All right, so let's just do a quick recap here because I know that was a lot of information. On our must section, our must courses here, we're gonna have Gen Bio 1 and 2 at number 1. Number 2 is gonna be Gen Chem 1 and 2. Number 3 is gonna be Organic Chem 1 and 2. Number 4 is gonna be Biochem 1 and 2. Number 5 is gonna be Physics 1 and 2. And number 6 is going to be English Composition 1 and 2. All right, and now moving on to the highly recommended list here that I made. So number 1 is going to be Statistics class. Number 2 is going to be a Genetics class. Number 3 is going to be a Molecular Bio class. Number 4 is going to be a Cell Bio class. Number 5 is going to be a Microbiome class. And number 6 is going to be an Anatomy and Physiology class. All right, and now moving on to our section that I say take it if you can. So the first course here is going to be Intro to Psychology. Number 2 is going to be Developmental Psychology. Number 3 is going to be Intro to Soc. Number 4 is going to be Ethics. And number 5 is going to be Medical Terminology. And that's it for the video. If you made it this far, it means you're really committed as a pre-med and you really want to, you know, get to that next level and get to medical school. So congrats on that. You know, before we let you go here, just a quick reminder to smash that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and share the video if you like the content. And also, if you have any questions, concerns, comments that you want to talk about, anything, feel free to comment down below, or you can even reach out to us if you need any help on anything. So feel free to do that if that's what you want to do. All right, and that's it. So we hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you on that next one.